Hello, hello, hello. I would first like to thank the lovely Janet Jackson for helping us bring us in. You're probably like, why is Matt playing music at the start of the session? Um, well, a few reasons. It actually works on a couple different layers. That is from a Janet Jackson album called Velvet Rope, which was an album I was absolutely obsessed with when I was in high school. Um, but I kind of lost track of it. I haven't probably listened to it in years. But I don't know if you know this, but the president of the United States of America, Obama, put out two really awesome Spotify playlists. And there was a day one and a night one. And they are really excellent. Like as a musician, I was very impressed with his picks. And he had this Janet Jackson song, I Get Lonely, on it. Um, it is an incredible song. Now, not only is that one of the best intros, I might even play it on the way out too. Like I hope everyone was there for the beginning because the that the way it kind of builds up slowly is really powerful, and then it just like hits, and there's like this beautiful vocals, and of course Janet Jackson's voice. But recorded music in general, and this song in particular, I think is a good opportunity to practice a different type of listening. So everyone's homework assignment, go to whatever streaming service or YouTube or whatever it is that has that song. I want you to listen to the song. Just listen to it and enjoy it, see what you notice, etc. Then I want you to listen to it again, but with a special assignment. Only listen to the bass line. So if you're a musician, you know that that's the lowest part or what a bass sounds like. If you're not a musician, it's the part that makes your car go like, like the bass line in that song is so good. I can't find exactly what musician it was, but as best I can tell, the credits say the instruments are from Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. When you listen to just the bass line in that song, you'll hear something that you don't necessarily hear in a lot of more sequenced or pre-recorded music, which is like it's improvisational. It builds up. He starts as it gets to kind of the last chorus. You hear him actually like instead of just doing long notes, actually driving it forward with like essentially like eighth notes, don 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 don, and it's part of the tapestry that makes up this song and evokes emotions and has this effect on us. But unless you thought to listen to just the bass line, you might not never notice that because it's kind of happening behind the scenes. Bass players are notoriously behind the scenes, actually. Another musician that's good for this is Sting or the Police. Sting, a lot of people don't know, was a jazz musician. And also a lot of people don't know is a bass player. And a lot of his music plays the bass. So I think we know him famously as a singer, but incredible bass player. And when you listen to the bass on some of his songs, particularly his live performances, it's really interesting what's going on. They say the bass is often, I remember this one I'd play, like if the bass player was off, the whole band was off. The drummer can't do anything, no one else can do anything. You really need the bass to lay down the groove and to set the beat that the rest of the band follows. What's the bass have to do with WordPress? Well, this is kind of a fun hangout today. It's a Saturday afternoon for me. It's middle of the night for some of y'all and early morning for others. So I kind of love this whole WordSesh thing. I got to watch a few of the sessions last night and snippets of some today. There's been some really impressive talks. And I kind of wanted both to open it up for a Q&A because we have this really cool Q&A section down. So if you don't know, you can ask questions in the chat. I might miss them, but there's a little button that says ask a question or suggest a topic. You can ask questions and also vote on the things there. And I'll go through these in kind of the second half of this and try to answer all of them. Just talk about whatever you have. It's actually kind of interesting because this is similar to a format that I do once a month inside Automatic, where we call them town halls. And it's either me or me and some guests. And usually I play music at the beginning and at the end. And it's a pure Q&A where people ask questions and myself and whoever else is on there answers them. So that's pretty fun. And I'm glad that we're doing this virtually because normally I only have a chance to do this at WordCamps. And it's a little less, I know some people get nervous, like standing up in front of a crowd and asking a question. Some people definitely don't, and I wish they did, but some people do. And, so asking it in sort of this fashion with the moderator interface, I think is a little bit easier. But I just wanted to jam with y'all on a few things that have been on my mind that I've been noticing. And, also highlight some of the bass players in the WordPress world, because some folks that are really laying down the groove and enabling the rest of the band, the noticeable parts to be appreciated, but that we might not appreciate or think about. So we just had this has been a big week for the WordPress and Automatic and everything world. It kicked off with a fantastic release, 4.6. He goes by Ocean 90, but it was a very smooth release, not turbulent at all. And one of the things that I found especially impressive, I'm always happy with an on-time release and one that is drama-free. But I also really liked that I believe this was the first release that we went out with 50 languages at 100% translated. All right, I want you to think about that for a minute. And maybe a second homework assignment is to have a few drinks later and see if you can actually name 50 languages. I don't think I could. That 50 is a lot of languages. And so the fact that we had 50 of them translated to 100% on the same day as a major software release is something that even a lot of professional, the Googles and Microsofts of the world don't always do. So major kudos to the team. There was actually a pretty good post on WP Tavern. Talked with Petya and a few other folks in the translation internationalization team. Said there are now 1,247 translation editors. Wow. That's more than we get code contributions in every single release. And maybe more than we've had unique code contributors, or about the same as we have unique code contributors the past year. It's been probably the last 2, maybe 3, definitely 2, maybe 3, state of the words. I've talked about internationalization and translation a ton. This idea that, WordPress is great, but really what makes it magical is the community that surrounds it and the over 45,000 plugins and themes. And so even though we had core translated, let's rewind to 3-4 years ago, we had core translated, it's so important to get these extensions, the plugins and themes translated, because that's where a lot of the magic for WordPress happens. And if you could imagine not speaking English, for example, and only being able to use plugins that were translated into, say, Mandarin, WordPress seems very small then and very limited, and maybe doesn't compare well to the other things going on in the market. So getting everything internationalized has been fantastic. It's been on my mind for a long time. It was actually the project that when Nason joined Audrey, which was I think like 5 years ago originally, that was his first project. So it took a little while to get going, but it's now, we basically have this now. And I've been impressed that the internationalization team has had some very open point of view and minds to try different things around both having language leaders, which sort of arbitrate and ensure quality for translations across plugins, but also where there are plugins that have organizations behind them or their own translation community like Yoast does, to leverage that and sort of work with that in an efficient way to just get the most translations of the best quality in front of the most people as quickly as possible, which I think is a pretty good way to summarize kind of our goals there. Other thing that's been kind of fun this year is we've had a really nice uptick in WordCamps. 2015, a lot of WordCamp growth actually slowed. And for some stats, like number of WordCamps in the US went down. We had 43 in the US in 2014. 2015, we only had 42. Well, this year is blowing them both out of the water. So currently on the books for this year is 110 WordCamps around the world, 49 of those in the US. This is the most WordCamps ever, and our first time to break into triple digits, which is pretty darn cool. So far, we have 22,545 tickets sold. We're about halfway through the year, a little more than halfway through the year, but we're about halfway through the year. And that last year, the entirety of last year, we only sold about 22,000 tickets. So with a lot of big stuff still on the calendar, including WordCamp US, we are equal to last year's attendance, or tickets sold of WordCamps. which I think is pretty darn cool. So kudos to everyone who works on WordCamps. It gets even neater when you think about meetups. So this is the point where I say, raise your hand if you've been to a meetup. So you can laugh at yourself if you just raised your hand at home to a computer screen. But the meetups have been growing in a really interesting way as well. We currently have 325 meetup groups, and that are doing 1,905 events with 119,894 members across those meetup groups. Whoa. Okay, 119,000 of anything. That's bigger than most stadiums can hold. It's more people than go to the Super Bowl. When you think of that number of people, either evangelizing for WordPress or being exposed to it through the community, which is, as we all know, one of the best parts of everything in WordPress is the people surrounding it. Pretty powerful. And I think that those ripple effects are a big part of what drives our sort of usage throughout the world. When you think about it, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I'll talk about growth in a minute. So we are averaging right now about 254 events per month, so 254 meetups. So, call it 8 a day. Somewhere in the world, meetups are happening. And if you have not been to a meetup, I'd highly encourage you to attend one, even if you already know everything. Because you know what? There's a lot of people there who don't know as much as you. And for, an hour or two once a month, you can eat some food, drink some drinks, and really make a big impact on someone's introduction to WordPress and their experience and impression of the community through being an ambassador yourself, which is, speaking of baselines, always the thing. It's like the dark matter of the WordPress contributions. There are probably hundreds of thousands of people, and all of us in lives day to day, that personally evangelize for the service. And we see the Squarespace bookmark on our aunt's computer, and we say, "Hey, I got something better than that can help you with that." I mean, the people power of WordPress is probably, if I had to guess, maybe the thing that contributes most to a lot of the usage of WordPress and why we've been able to capture 26% of the web so far. Ha! Dark matter, WordPress bingo. That's pretty funny. I would love to see a Matt Mullenweg talk bingo card. You definitely have to have, what are some of ticks? A reference to jazz, a reference to R&B or music, dark matter, orthogonal is a good one, tessellation. I know I overuse ecosystem, family, love. These are things that I'm sure I probably talk about a lot and would make a good bingo card. You can also have a bingo card element for auto updates, because I feel like I've talked about auto updates and updates every time I've gone in front of a crowd about WordPress, probably for the past 8 years. And it's funny how it's evolved. In the beginning, we'd talk about Firefox's update system, because Firefox would show you like a little bubble and be like, update your extensions. And then we started talking about, or if actually very first we would talk about operating systems. So like Windows Update, like, hey, Clippy pops up, hey, we've got some updates. And then we talked about Firefox, and then we talked about Chrome kind of updating silently in the background. And now we mostly talk about WordPress, because I feel like we have a pretty good update system. But I wanted to share with y'all kind of a personal story that just happened a few days ago that I have not blogged or shared publicly. Actually, I've only told one person about it, which is my mom, maybe a friend or two, around auto updates and how they affected me in the physical world, and perhaps why we should be careful about updates, or why we need to approach doing updates, particularly automatic updates, very deliberately, so we don't mess up 26% of the web, which I know is something that keeps Gary Pendergast and Dion up at night. So it was Friday. So Friday nights, I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm actually in Katy, Texas right now. I'm at my mom's house. So hello from Katy. I usually don't broadcast from here, but I thought I'd say howdy. and oldest friends live in Houston, and there's a few who I know from high school. They all have kids now. Well, they don't all have kids, but a bunch of them have kids. So it's hard to get out. So we kind of planned this Friday night. Wait, was it Friday or was it Thursday? Today's Saturday. It was Thursday night. So go out to this cool Mexican bar called LaGrange. To be responsible, I take an Uber there because I don't want to drive and drink, even in Houston, where actually, especially in Houston, where Uber is quite good. I'm very sad for my friends in Austin, where they have banned Uber and Lyft. Oh, I shouldn't say banned Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft had decided because the fingerprint regulations that Uber and Lyft drew out over are the same we have in Houston, but they're still in Houston. So I think it's some combination of like commercial things plus political wrangling. But I will say that if you're going to go out and have a drink, please take something like an Uber or a Lyft. And so I did. I normally keep all my doors locked and I don't take a key. I have an app on my phone using SmartThings that allows me to open and close my garage. And I have an August smart lock. And so I can get to my garage, then unlock the garage door, and I'm in my house. And I don't need anything except my phone. And in fact, nowadays, my phone case is actually also my wallet. So I've got one of these things. This is actually from Belroy. It's just a little slim 6 Plus case that allows you to store 2 cards there, 1 card there. I usually keep like a little, like 1 bill folded in the case. And now I really only have one thing to keep track of. So you'll almost never find me with a wallet anymore or keys of any type. So I went out, hours pass, had some great queso, had some great guacamole, saw my friends. I returned back home. At this point, it's probably, 1 a.m. So I pressed the button to open the garage. It goes, it didn't open. So long story short, I'm on my Wi-Fi though, so I'm outside of my house. So I'm able to sort of connect everything. I'm chatting with Rose Simon, my assistant. We're trying to get in we're both trying like the app. I'm trying, there's a lockbox, but neither of us know the code. So basically I'm like walking back and forth in front of my own house. I'm surprised no one called the police. I kind of wish they had called the police, especially when a few minutes later, then jumped my own fence. So I ended up, because I have a patio, so I thought maybe one of the patio doors was open. I guess the moral of the story, like the good news was all of my doors were locked and I was unable to break into my own house. The bad news was whatever smart system there was that was allowing me to get in wasn't working. And so at this point, I actually considered a few things. Luckily, it was a very cool evening and there were no mosquitoes. And Houston usually is pretty vicious with mosquitoes. So there were, the mosquitoes weren't too bad. So I ended up just napping on the patio. So I decided to sleep there. I knew that my assistant Mo would be up in the morning. She has a key so she could get in. So I thought, no big deal. I considered like taking an Uber to a friend's house or my mom's house. But I was like, it's a nice night. Whatever. And I also, thought back to, letters to a store, things that are tough. So it makes you appreciate, sleeping, the luxuries of day-to-day life that we might take for granted. For example, being in Houston and sleeping in air conditioning on a bed. But as things go, like being on your own patio isn't that bad. So I went to sleep, woke up in the morning. What was interesting, though, and the moral of the story, is why I was not able to get access to the house. So I have a smart garage opener. It was actually, well, who to blame is that a question? But the normal system I use for controlling my lights and everything like that is called SmartThings, which I actually was an investor in. and sold to Samsung. So it's now Samsung SmartThings. Not bad. Like if you have Z-Wave or Zigbee devices, allows you to control lights and automate things and do lots of stuff. It turns out that at some point between when I left for the, I should say that I used the SmartThings to close the garage when I left. Because otherwise I have to press the button and run really fast and like jump over the laser thing. And I'm a little embarrassed doing that in front of Uber drivers. So normally what I do is I get in the Uber and I press the button on my phone to close the garage. So the at some point between when I left and when I got home on a Thursday night, the connection between SmartThings and I think it's called MyQ, which I think is from a company called Chamberlain that does the smart garage system, closed. So essentially there was a software update that locked me out of my own home. And for me, it wasn't like, the story is funny because, I climbed my own fence and slept on my patio and I was totally fine. I was safe. If there had been mosquitoes out, I would have been a much more unhappy story. But to be honest, I probably would have just gone to a friend's house or something like that. So it wasn't a huge, huge, huge deal. I still had my cell phone. I still had charge. So I wasn't in danger or isolated from the world. But the fact that, well, one, the APIs between these two companies broke. I think it's something where the API was actually like SmartThings was talking to our private IP address, and Chamberlain was changing the API or something. But two, that this happened without really good communication from SmartThings. If they had sent me a push notification or an email or anything, I would have liked if they sent me all of those things and called my number and put a notice in the app, everything. All I saw when I tried to do the garage button was a silent failure. In fact, I can show you this silent failure, how it works now. So here's SmartThings. I will go down to the thing, which is my garage. Garage MyQ opener. And you will see it says last activity 15 hours and 54 minutes ago. It says closed. Now, if I press open there, nothing happens. It says opening, and then in a minute it'll reset. Be like, nope, just kidding. Oh, last activity now, 1 day, 21 hours ago. So that was 1 day, 21 hours ago and 54 minutes is when I left and the garage worked. And when I returned, it did not work. So Modem Mover says, this better not be a segue into why the API needs admin parity. Ha! That is hilarious. It actually is a good example of why you should use all of your APIs for first-party apps that you rely on. And in theory, I think if I had used the MyQ app, which I didn't have on my phone and didn't know the login for, I would have been able to use that to open the garage. It was just a connection between SmartThings and MyQ, which broke. So, but we should remember that software has real-life consequences. We don't want to do a WordPress update and make a lot of people sleep on their patio, especially if there's mosquitoes. So that's the funny example. A real-life example might be, there's now, I know through WooCommerce, but let's also include easy digital downloads and all the membership stuff and everything like that. There's billions of dollars of merchandise being sold every year through WordPress-powered websites that do e-commerce. An auto update that takes them down for, let's say it takes sites down for a couple hours, could have an implication of millions and millions of dollars across the economy. But of course, none of that matters in relation to the cost of the trust that we would lose, in that I now no longer trust the system. And that is not something you put a price on, and not something that can easily be gotten back by any of the parties involved. The garage door openers, the SmartThings, the anything. And so on the bright side, it's good not to have backdoors into your house or into software. So, here's a good one. How a bad WordPress REST API can make you homeless and be exposed to Zika. And David makes a funny bug that it's all about bugs. Funny joke, it's all about bugs. So that was my sort of little riff on updates. Finally, I just wanted to talk to y'all about just a random idea I've been having recently. just something that's been kind of, sometimes these things kind of bounce around in my head. I wrote this down, so let me find it. Ah. So something that's been on my mind a little bit is that probably never in WordPress's 13-year history has there been more threats and more competition to it. And related to that is probably never since I became passionate about these issues has the open web been more under attack. And attack sounds more hyperbolic than it sounds hyperbolic, but when you think about the trend of all major internet services, the dominant ones right now, particularly the Twitters, Facebooks of the world, they're tending towards more and more closed, more and more walled gardens, less and less of what made the internet amazing in the first place, whether that's Twitter and its terrible record around APIs and third-party developers, how they turned off RSS feeds, or really Facebook, which gets a little bit of a pass because it's so darn useful. But when you think about it, Facebook's market cap of several $100 billion is really just a privatization of the much, much larger trillions of dollars of activity that was happening on the open web before, that they're essentially now bringing inside their walls and, having people make the Faustian bargain of like working within their ecosystem and getting enough benefit from it that they're locked in and they pay to work within the ecosystem. The sort of classic example of like you make a Facebook page, you're a business, you make a Facebook page, you pay Facebook to get more followers. I mean, it's literally something you can pay them to do. And then to actually talk to those followers, it used to be free, and now they charge you for your followers to actually see your updates. Twitter does something of the same, although they're a bit better in that particular regard. But they've both been, if you look at Google, Twitter, Facebook, the fact that I think it's 85 cents of every new ad dollar being spent right now is going to, I think, just Google and Facebook. It's scary. And, there's been lots of articles written about how this affects publishers and news media and things like that. I think mostly because, news media is writing about that. So there's almost nothing more that media loves than to write about themselves. And I think the untold story is a little bit is how this is affecting open platforms like WordPress, which are trying to create a more open web that people are stopping using because these other things are more convenient or provide a promise of distribution like Medium does, or the fact that they lock you in might be open for a long time, and they're only going to close and do the bait and switch downstream. Because right now, like I say, Medium is being subsidized by its $140 million in investment capital. So they don't need to charge you for anything now. But, a couple of years down the line, they will. So this is also an area where, where I sometimes feel cognitive dissonance with some of the other core WordPress contributors or committers. Because when we talk about roadmaps or features or things that are going to be in a next release, I think about it very much through the lens of what's going to change the growth curve of WordPress as a whole. What is going to take us from 26% to 75%? What's going to allow us to grow faster than we did before, even as we get larger, which is very, very hard because of the law of large numbers. And this is why, occasionally there's a very clear answer. To bring it back to translation and internationalization, English is only the first language of, I talked about this in the last WordCamp, I want to say like 15%, WordCamp US, about 15% of the world, English is the first language. So we have a 6x opportunity if we're able to make WordPress as fluent in the rest of the world's languages as it is in English. So that's obviously a huge growth opportunity. That takes us to above 100%. So that would work. But it was also one of those rare things where I felt like, the geeky sides of it, like language packs and stuff like that, that got people excited, were also well aligned with, from sort of a strategic point of view, what would have the biggest impact on WordPress growth and fulfilling our mission of democratizing publishing, creating more open web. So something I've been thinking about is, could we bring together almost like a WordPress growth council? So there's now in the ecosystem, bingo, of WordPress, there's a lot of folks that are invested in WordPress's growth and whose business models are perhaps predicated on a growing pie of WordPress. You could argue that for every single plugin business, because by definition, they're never going to grow larger than the number of WordPress sites there are, as long as they're a WordPress plugin. You can think about it with the hosting companies, who have over half of their customers, in many cases, running WordPress. You can think about it with the consulting agencies, who the demand for high-end WordPress sites is, yes, driven by their sales force and their sort of competence, but also by the fact that, the CTO, when they said we need a new website, WordPress was on the table, which is due somewhat to its success. The flywheel of us being successful because we're successful already. Excuse me, a little hint water needed. The other thing that brings us a little bit into focus is, like I talked about, we talked a little about the social media of the world, but we also have very, very direct competitors in Squarespace, Weebly, and Wix. Wix is a public company, so it's actually possible to see their numbers and look at things. And Squarespace talks about some of their numbers, etc. I've spoken about this before, I think, in WordCamp Europe, when I had an excellent conversation with Mr. Brian. This year alone, there's about $250 million being spent in marketing and advertising for proprietary systems against WordPress. $250 million is a lot of money. So I just want to pause and think about that for a moment. That's more spent in 1 year than has ever been invested in all of the WordPress companies you or I could name combined since they started. That's more money spent in marketing than many consumer brands that you might think of, like a laundry detergent or Swiffer or Coca-Cola. I'm sure spends more than that, but it's getting up there to where it's like that level of things. No one company in our ecosystem could match that, nor should they need to. But if you took together the combined efforts of all of the companies in the WordPress ecosystem, this is kind of like my 5 for the future idea, which has actually gone super well in terms of increasing contributions and the speed of WordPress. I think we could do a lot to figure out what would be the roadmap for countering this huge, huge, huge marketing spend being directed against us, because we're the big guy here. We are the 26% and they're like a 1%. But even when they're smaller, they might be cannibalizing some of the most valuable aspects of the WordPress customer base, which will cause a lot of strife for many of the businesses built on WordPress. Unduly so. Like some things, markets change. Theme businesses, I think, sort of naturally had a ceiling to them because you can only ever run one theme at a time on your website. and as more and more people, as there are more and more themes in the world, the individual share of each one probably goes down. And many theme businesses have somewhat peaked. I think even like the theme forces of the world, which get a little bit from lots of people, aren't growing at the rate they used to. There's a diminishing marginal return. But some don't need to. So for example, there's a lot of businesses that I think grow as WordPress becomes more abundant. And those are, I think, very threatened by the default or easy thing being to go to Squarespace or Wix to start a website than WordPress. other thing that has sort of made me concerned about this is Wix is doing a very, very good job internationally. And in fact, if you look at some brand surveys, last month was one of the first months that they were essentially growing faster than WordPress in brand awareness for many, many geographies, including the US. So that's something to consider. What is that driven by? Now, that said, we are roughly growing as fast without spending the same money. So they have to spend $160 million per year because A, I think the product's worse. B, I think that they don't have the community that WordPress has. So they have to buy what essentially we get for free. But I think that we could start to coordinate a little more effectively than to essentially compete with these external threats, these proprietary threats, better. Now, also there's a chance. One thing that it's important for everyone in the WordPress world to keep in mind is that these threats, external threats and proprietary threats, are far, 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 far bigger than any of the intra WordPress open source threats. So, yes, some sort of Bluehost and GoDaddy, like, compete for customers and all that, just like WooCommerce and AZ Digital Downloads and WP Commerce and all that. But like, we can grow the pie far, 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 far faster than we can take share from either of the people in the same pie, if that makes sense. And there's a much bigger opportunity. So for the host, I think it's particularly existential because all of their website builder platforms are terrible. Like if you look at GoDaddy's website builder and stuff like that, and there's really no indication that they will be able to match the sophistication of Squarespace or Wix or Weebly within the next 5 years, much less the sophistication and breadth of WordPress. So really using WordPress is their best bet to address this threat because they are probably going to feel the dollar hits first of something like a Wix. And if you, in fact, you look, Wix today on the public markets with about $300 million in revenue is valued more than EIG, which has over $700 million of revenue and owns Bluehost, HostGator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the public markets are rewarding some of these newer platforms that are more streamlined. So there's a few things we need to do there. Like one, I think just convening like a monthly video chat or something, quarterly. I don't know what the right venue is. Of people who care about growth to talk about it. There's a few things we need to do. I think we need to figure out first why we've grown so far. We all probably have assumptions there, but there's ways to dig into the data and see like, well, why is WordPress where it is today? There used to be Typepad, there used to be Blogger, there used to be LiveJournal. There were lots of competitors. So what has changed today that is perhaps affecting things more? Marketing is the biggest one that's obvious to me. Never before have we had competitors that spent this much on marketing. But I'm sure there's some other things in the product and everything. So let's figure out why we've been successful so far. 2, we should try to enumerate and track what is being spent right now. So if you added up all the advertising that all the hosts do, all the affiliate fees that various people pay, sponsorships of events, things like that, what does that add up to? So we know like what's the gap we need to close. If we're spending $100 million a year, they're spending $300 million a year. Let's talk about that and figure out. Not that spending more money is necessarily better, but we need to know sort of the relative arsenals on both sides. And then finally, I think look at what is helping us and what we can continue to grow organically. So when you think of the sites that do WordPress tutorials or the people on YouTube or the Yoast of the world and the advanced SEOs that sort of come to more of a marketing SEO optimization angle towards this problem. So I think we need to double down on what's working. I think some of that's going to be internationalization, community aspects, meetups, WordCamps, etc. So figure out how to accelerate and grow that. I think we need to figure out a plan for advertising where we're not competing with each other, but really directing that more outward against the folks who might go to like a Wix or Squarespace, and get more knowledge and awareness of where we are. So that's kind of something I've been riffing on, thinking about. Some good chats going on about the customizer and the user interfaces of different things. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to go. Looks like we only have, I spoke for longer than I thought, about 11 minutes longer than I thought, so I apologize. So I'm going to start to hit some of these questions. So if you haven't submitted a question yet, submit it. Put it in there. I should be okay to go to 55. Okay, perfect. Because I was planning a 10-minute jazz outro. So let me start with the top questions. All right, this comes from Brian and a similar one from Kirsten Lambertson. The Meta news is amazing. Would love to hear about what he'll be doing in the next 12 months at AHC. And Brian asks, what's the first big thing you want John Maeda to tackle? Good question. Yeah, that was some of the big news this week. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the rest of the big news because I got sidetracked on 4.6. We also had the announcement John Maeda, who's a pioneer in design and MIT, president of RISD, was at Kleiner Perkins as their first design partner, like a visionary really in the world of design and in open source and in computational things, and has a great book called Laws of Simplicity, another one called Creative Leadership. Please check them out if you haven't yet. Has joined Automatic as our global head, computational design and inclusion. So I think some of what we want him to work on is built into that title. So as John laid it out in his post, and .blog launched. So if you go to design.blog, you can see 4 great essays. One of them is from John talking about why he's joining. Design.blog is actually a new magazine Automatic is putting out that is going to have new essays every Thursday. So go to it every Thursday to see new stuff. The homepage will be designed by a different Automatic designer. And John's site, John's article there, he talks about part of why he joined, his journey to and from open source, and what his title means. So the global means that recognizing that Automatic is an international company and WordPress is an international product. So it's not just a lot of these discussions around design, diversity, and inclusion often are very US-centric. And that's important because the US has, in many ways, a unique history here and a unique opportunity to do things differently. But issues around equality, access, are really global issues. And in some countries, the challenges, I think, are far, far greater than even what we have in the US. The computational design is because John has a deep design background, including classical, physical, everything. He's on the board of both White and Kennedy, which is a famous advertising firm, and Sonos, which is the best way to have audio throughout your whole house. So computational design, as he defines it, is design that's impacted by Moore's law, this idea that things are doubling every 18 months. It's interaction. And then finally, inclusion is both talking about the implications of good design being by definition inclusive, and touching on the broader issues in tech and Automatic and WordPress in the world of diversity and inclusion, which we talk about diversity a bit more. I saw a great t-shirt or quote the other day. Actually, it's an article. I will let David find the link to it, but it talked about how diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. So you can drop the link there. I'm looking at the comments. David says, Matt.blog is a beauty. Thank you very much. I'm a little disappointed because I didn't change the design at all. That's exactly what was at matt.wordpress before. It just had a new URL. John made on the 2017 default theme. He'll definitely be talking to the people working on it. David says to check out the price for ghost.blog. I wish there was some sort of conspiracy there, but there's just, I think, a list of words. And because ghost is a very common word, the way .blog works is that some domains are essentially at a base price, call it $20 or $40. Some are kind of premium, $200. I think it goes all the way up to like $100,000 or $200,000 for a single domain, depending on how premium it is. So that's just based on like word list, essentially. It's not anything particularly competitive. As you can tell if you looked up WordPress.blog, I think it says it's $200. So what is the first big thing I want John to tackle? I think first is just listening. There's a lot to get to speed on. Inside Automatic, where we have WordPress.com, which is a big thing on its own, WooCommerce and e-commerce, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We have .blog, which just launched. We have VIP. We have Jetpack and how Jetpack interacts with the broader WordPress ecosystem. And then that's even before you get to WordPress and open source design and contributors and everything happening on that side. So there's a lot to get going. And I think a big part of John's initial on-ramping will be learning as much as possible and bringing his beginner's mind and perspective to sort of, like that scene in where Neo plugs into the Matrix and they're like, it's like, I know Kung Fu. John is a complete sponge for information and learns very quickly. And I imagine it will not be too long before he gets up to speed. I'd say after that is really working with the 29 designers across Automatic and in the future, the designers and design contributors through the entire open source world, both WordPress and otherwise, to up our quality, because there are many aspects of the WordPress user experience and even the Calypso user experience, which is a complete iteration on WP Admin that are not up to par. They could be far, 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 far better. And I think that we need to, as quickly as possible, with every urgency and all haste, get to that baseline where we can look at it and say, this thing is good. We are proud of this experience. And I would not say that today. I know for a fact that, how sometimes I joke, this can be on the bingo, that I'm the unhappiest WordPress user in the world. John might be vying with me for that title because he has an incredible gift for finding really good and annoying bugs in the WordPress experience. Kirsten says, I'd love to be a designer at AHC at this moment. We are hiring, as always. So we have gotten definitely a spike in design applications, but as with many roles like engineering support at Automatic, we hire people as fast as they come in. And we are finally caught up on applications. I the other week had a backlog of about 2,500 applications I was able to go through on a very, 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 very long plane ride. Number 2 question. When do you estimate the API will be fully integrated into core? J-Trip says projects like Django do not have an API core, still hugely successful. And there's XML RPC in core. Okay, so this is kind of like a conversation happening on the question. It is true that the API could be much more successful than it is today without being in core. But that said, we do have APIs in core, for example, XML RPC, that I feel like we can have much better versions of that will enable clients built on WordPress to do much more interesting things. So to the question, when do I think the API will be in core? I do not want to guess or predict. I feel like API project has actually been really good about these conversations happening on the Slack channels and in the meetups. I have joined many of these. And a lot of my thoughts there I prefer to kind of put out in that meetup format because it's with everyone who's doing the contribution there. It's a two-way chat. It's not just me on a video telling everyone what I think. So I do have an opinion there. I do have an answer there. I'm not going to say it because I feel like the best venue for that sort of discussion is probably, in the more collaborative environment where, it can be more of a discussion and less of like just me pontificating from Katy, Texas. So I will say this is pretty cool stuff. So the REST API is live for every single WordPress.com blog. So that means potentially there are over 100 million sites that have that plugin enabled now and that you can access. I will also say, as just kind of a thing to think about, is I've been really fascinated and interested with GraphQL. And I wonder if there might be an opportunity for us to leapfrog a little bit. And maybe, although when we started talking about this years ago, REST was probably the state of the art and the best way that we could approach this. With modern clients, there might be some cool things there. So something we're investigating with some of the Calypso stuff. Hi, Matt. There's been a lot of talk online recently about the core developer group not really listening to the WordPress community. What are your general thoughts about this, and if you think it's a real problem? Have you got any plans connecting to make the situation better linked to the WordPress Foundation, becoming a more open, democratic organization? Those are definitely two different questions. But I see why they're built in the same, because if you have the assumption that there's a group that's not listening or being accountable to the community, a solution to that could be to like create some sort of bureaucratic structure or voting mechanisms or something like that, where you could, where there would be like a board that would tell the core contributors what to do based on, sort of the silent majority of folks who, have opinions or aren't being listened to or something like that. That's an interesting idea. I think in practice, it's not as relevant for a number of reasons. One, it sort of forgets that everyone is volunteering. So I think that if we feel like the core developer group isn't listening in their volunteer work, telling them what to do isn't going to change that. I think, in this idea that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, I think the best approach there would be making the core developer group want to do the thing that you feel aligns with the WordPress community. Even making those two different things is a little bit of a false dichotomy because the WordPress community by definition includes the core developer group. So I do not think this is a huge problem simply because the group that develops WordPress is much larger than people think. It's really, if you look down to it, although, I'm a benevolent dictator and there's 12 core committers and stuff like that, day to day, the actual decisions that affect most people in WordPress around plugins, around themes, around documentations, around so much is really spread out among hundreds of people who are responsible. And within those hundreds, there is a ton of diversity of thought and opinion. So I don't worry too much about, what I would call the WordPress community being too closed. Now, that said, listening is something that I think you could never do well enough. And so if you were to ask me, could core developers listen more? If you could ask me, I won't even talk about core developers. You could say, Matt, do you feel like you could listen more? I would say unequivocally, yes. I do a lot to listen. I do support on WordPress.com. I go to WordCamps, big and small. I, listen in to live streams and listen to questions. I watch WordSesh. I do a lot. But I feel like I could listen more. And I feel like the more I listened, the better decisions and more informed decisions I would be able to make in terms of my influence and my guiding that I give to the WordPress community. So the So in summary, I would say that yes, everyone could listen more. I'm not currently aware of any issues where I feel like the what could be called the core committers, etc., are ignoring a large constituency in the WordPress community, or um, or that there's any really urgent issues where a large mass of people want something that they don't. In fact, I worry more about the opposite, where perhaps we need to provide more leadership around things that people aren't asking for, but are really, really important to take WordPress to the next level. So that's a little bit more what I worry about. Now, that said, there's lots of ways to influence WordPress and Automatic and everything. So I will offer my own email and my own door, my own Twitter, my own contact form, everything. My own, you can accost me at WordCamps. Like, if there's something you feel like is really being missed, to the extent I'm able to influence that, convince me, and I will try to convince others. And I would say that's true for many people involved in WordPress. Convincing, the best way to influence is by convincing people. And it's not as good to, a good approach to that is not saying, we're not being listened to, we're not being listened to. It's just to, sit down and really understand both sides and then use data, use examples, use stories to make the case. All right. I think we are running plumb out of time. I'm starting to get, luckily, we're distributed, so there are no crooks that will pull me off the stage, but I really don't want to run into the next presenter's time, because next up is building a product on WordPress with Noel and Joel. Oh, that one's really good. I'm going to stay on and watch that. Noel and Joel. Oh, sorry. Noel and Joe. Sorry, Joe. Are amazing and two of my favorite people, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. So, sorry for calling you Joel, Joe. You will always be Joe to me. And to take us out, so don't cut it off yet. Let me pull up a quick song. Sorry, my phone is now not turning on, so the song I queued up is not coming up. So, why is this all grayed out? Here we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, WordSesh, for putting this together. Music isn't coming on, so I'll just say bye. Bye, everybody.